Once you've ruled out the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be true.
And it is not a question of a little occultism or a touch of mysticism, Mr. Benton. It is vampires, the host of damned souls of telepaths.
I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain term to walk the night.
Here, the old gods aren't dead.
And what of the true god?
He's dead. You can't complain.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
You're listening to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hi everybody, this is Irene Allen, the host of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show of the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And, you know, I forgot your name.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm leaving this bit in just to show people that, you know, we've only worked together for, 7-8 years now, and she still forgets my name.
Mark Johnson.
Thank you very much.
I just get a brain block, you know, it just stops when it comes to you. I think it is a sort of auto-protect thing.
Yeah, or you're just trying to, you know, block me out because I annoy you.
Oh, no. No, when will you ever annoy me?
Every time we do one of these shows.
Every time you talk to me.
Every time we come to this time of year.
Yes, it's coming up to July the 4th, people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take any notice of him in the UK.
Ungrateful Colonial Day, as I call it.
Tell you. There must be something. There must be something that you like that is British over there.
Oh, I didn't say we didn't like anything British.
Well, sausages.
Well, I didn't say we didn't like anything British. You know, we just, make fun of you when this holiday comes up.
Nah.
You know, and the fact that we had to, you know, come and save your butt twice, you know, 2 world wars.
Well,
but
no, that's pushing it. That is pushing it. That really is good. You are going too far now, so I'm going to change the subject.
Okay.
Before you get all the hate letters from the UK coming in.
I'm just teasing people. I'm just teasing.
Yeah, of course you are. You love Australia, I know that.
Yeah, I got to get over there someday. I still have never traveled over there.
Oh, you're going to love it. You will love it. Right, what was I going to say? Oh, yes. Brian's been on his folly. Brian, my husband, has built a folly.
What is a folly?
A folly?
Yes. What is
you don't know what a folly is, Mark, go and Google it, for God's sake.
Well, I know, like...
A folly is a... Oh, well, there are so many different types of follies in the UK. They're usually in the houses of big gardens and things, big houses with massive gardens. But I've got one out there now. I've got a folly, and it's an Italian folly. It's like an Italian wall of a ruin.
Oh, okay.
And
right.
You look out the window. There's a window in it. You look out the window. It takes you across there's little lavender growing outside the window, and then your eye goes across the herb garden and one thing or another. Brilliant.
Yeah,
my folly.
Seeing over here, when you say the word folly, it usually indicates something that's like ridiculous or needless, or you know, something that's kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Or something that's kind of a disaster, or people look down on it.
Folly, yeah. You know, it's either designed like a ruin or a temple or something like that, you know.
Well, see, I like your folly better than ours. So, see, there's something British I like.
Yeah, there you go. See?
Yep.
We have our follies.
There you go. And I have mine. You're on the other end of the microphone here. Oh!
I fell for that one, didn't I?
Yeah, you walked right into it. You opened that door, and I just walked right through it, you know?
Yeah. Well, anyway, what I'll do is I'll send a photograph, and I'll put a photograph out on my page on Facebook.
Okay.
People.
That will
At some point, when it's finished, it's not completely finished yet. We just planted out around it at the moment, but it's not completely finished yet. And it's all been painted white. Oh, it's fantastic, Mark.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Okay, then. That's enough of that.
That's enough of that. Well, I'll just put out there that I'll be going out next month to for my first vacation since this whole bloody pandemic started.
Yes, Palm Beach. Isn't that the British equivalent of Eastbourne?
I guess, Florida, which, actually ironic. I've only been to Florida staying for a vacation once, but that was Disney World, which isn't that impressive because I grew up in California and I prefer Disneyland, but that's just me, but never really stayed in Miami, Palm Beach, any of those areas. So we're not ready to travel out of the country yet, but so we're doing local, or relatively local, I should say.
Well, that's what most people are doing over here. Staying local for their holidays,
Yeah.
So, will you be getting a suntan, or will you end up like a little red lobster?
Well, speaking of British, I'm mostly coming from British Celtic stocks. I'm a ginger, so I've got the light pale skin with freckles and red hair. So I don't tan, I burn.
You burn, so you go red.
Yep. I'll go even more red.
God, I've only got to look at the sun. I go to like really golden brown. I don't burn.
Lucky you.
It's all those years in Italy, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay.
You built up a shell.
Yes, so can we have a photograph, or can I have a photograph of you when you are as red as a lobster?
Oh, yes. Hopefully I don't get that bad.
Well, just put some sun cream on your nose. You don't want it swelling up any bigger.
Yeah,
Right.
I have a big enough schnoz as it is.
We know.
Yes, as you constantly remind me. So, are we ready to get on with the show here?
Yeah, go on then.
Yeah, I think we tortured our guest long enough waiting in the wings here. So, tonight we want to welcome our guest, Jiulio Consiglio. Now, Jiulio is a former dental healthcare provider and educator turned spiritual writer and teacher. So he's an author now who focuses on the transformative power of inner stillness, the mind-body-spirit connection, and psychic abilities development. He has a brand new book that is coming out, I believe, in a couple of weeks called Opemn Your Third Eye, Activate Your Sixth Chakra, and Develop Your Psychic Abilities. So, Jiulio, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Mark and Irene. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Jiulio.
Sorry about that earlier, but that's usually what happens when she and I get going.
Some pretty good.
That's honest, Jiulio. That is pretty good because we're on air. If when we're off air and we get going, all hell breaks out. Literally, all hell breaks out.
Yeah, we have to behave for our audience. This is a semi-family show.
Yes, very true. Very true.
So, getting into, I do have to ask, reading your background, how you went from your profession to changing over completely to writing and working with spiritual transformation. How did that all come about? For our listeners, tell us a little bit about your story.
So there were several events, and some I would describe as wake-up calls that led me to a shift in awareness. So I did what most people do. So I finished high school. I actually grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, and I got accepted into a dental hygiene program in the United States. And I attended school there. When I graduated, I came back and I started working as a dental hygienist, and then eventually, soon after, as an educator. And during that time, I was dating my high school sweetheart. And about a year after graduation and a year into working, my oldest brother, my only brother, Steve, got a cancer diagnosis and passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
For a year. Sorry. Thank you. So that that threw me off. I began to create questions like, why did this happen? Why do things happen the way they do? My brother never smoked. He never drank. So that left me with a lot of questions. And so time went on, and I continued to work. Now, between the ages, I'm going to say essentially from 19 to about 33, I was also during that time period experienced intense feelings of anxiety. From one point of view, you could say I'm almost an empath. I was very sensitive to the energy that was within me and the energy of those around me. And at the time, I didn't understand it. So everything to me was dialed up quite a notch in terms of energy. So I ended up eventually then getting married, only to see that marriage crumble 15 months later. So now we're getting into 2002, 2003. And having that marriage fall apart, at the point, on the surface, it appeared I was quite successful, actually. So I had the job, I had the house, had the nice car, I was married. But there was something profoundly, something missing. So soon after that marriage fell apart into the next year, I was given a cancer diagnosis. So now, at this point, the universe had my attention. But what it did to me was just create even more anger and frustration. You would think perhaps, okay, so with these wake-up calls, something was going to give. I wasn't ready yet. And it was the fall now of 2005. I went to bed one night, and I'm a very light sleeper to begin with. So at around 3 a.m., I was suddenly awakened or more alarmed to a negative presence sort of hovering above my bed. And as I looked at my sheets, I distinctly recall them being pulled off me. I sat up, more in shock than anything else, went downstairs, said a few prayers, and tried to fall back to sleep. The following day, I went back up to my bedroom to get ready for work, and I could still sense this negative entity, if you want to call it that, at the threshold of my bedroom. And I blew past it, essentially telling it where to go, jumped in the shower, and what I would describe as my lowest, I called out for assistance for another way to source energy, whoever was listening. And a few weeks later, that intense desire or my prayers were answered in what I would describe as an awakening through third eye activation.
Now, were you doing any types of meditation at that time to reach that state?
To be honest, I around 16, 17, I had always had an interest. I had read, one book, Transforming Your Dragons. I think I still have that book, actually. But there was a missing element. I would always sort of go back to reading the occasional book, but there was no white hot, what I describe as like a white hot desire to change. It was sort of, an interest, but I didn't, I never practiced meditation, although when I look back, I can recall always sort of being centered, with a quiet mind, although I didn't recognize what that was at the time.
Now, tell me a little bit more in going when you started on the journey aspect of it. What other types of, I guess I would say, any synchronicities or any other spiritual experiences that you may have had, or any more encounters with this negative entity, and why do you think it was there?
I'll first touch upon the last question. That negative entity, and to this day, I sort of still on the fence, regardless whether it was created almost as a poltergeist because of the negative emotion I was experiencing, or was that entity already there, and I, decided to purchase that townhouse. There was great perfection in it because that was the final straw, the final catalyst to have me get ready to what I would say is surrender to the highest self. So
you said townhouse.
Yeah.
Do you mean the actual building that you'd bought?
So it was, I believe it was a row of 6 or 7 townhouses. I was on the end.
Oh, okay. It's just that I got a feeling that you just attracted it to you. Are you still in that house?
No, I ended up selling it. I had met someone and I wanted to live closer to her. So I was only there really probably 6 months, 7 months.
No, I just got the strong feeling that with being down and depressed and, mixed up at the time, that is something that you attracted into your aura sort of thing.
I'd have to agree with that completely, regardless of how it lined up, everything, every event lined up for this shift in consciousness. And in regards to other experiences, I had a pretty profound one while my brother was passing away. In the weeks before he passed, what I would do is I'd work in the dental office till about 7 p.m. and I'd go straight to the hospital. And a lot of times family members would already be there. My other 2 sisters would already be there. So this one night in particular, I got off the elevator, did a hard right, and his room was straight ahead from me, about 30 feet. But before going into his room, to the right was a very long hallway. And at the end of that hallway was a greeting room. And it had, I remember, a green couch. It was very bland. A TV, maybe one picture. This one evening when I got off the elevator and I glanced right, I saw a statue that appeared to be Holy Mary with roses throughout the wall. So I walk into the room and I said to my sister Jerry, I said, "That's amazing. They turned the greeting room," I said, "into a chapel." She looked at me and said, What are you talking about?" We stepped back out into the hallway and it was a greeting room. That vision or what I had seen was gone.
Yeah.
And shortly after he passed away.
Interesting. Now, in a lot of ways I can relate. I also lost a brother a couple years back and went through a pretty negative time as well.
He was your twin, wasn't he?
Yeah, my identical twin brother. He wasn't a long illness. He dropped dead of a heart attack. So, but I understand how that feels, and what made me think about maybe the negative entity you attracted it either with, as you mentioned, your negative feelings. Negativity attracts negativity, or even a kind of, I don't know what you would think about this, Irene, maybe a thought form type of entity because of the negative emotions and feelings was creating something.
Could well be. Yeah, I agree. It could well be, but whatever it was attached to him.
Yeah. Well, luckily,
you say it's still around?
Oh no! It was that one experience that was a final catalyst. After my awakening, after making that shift in consciousness, I did go on and experience events or psychic experiences or paranormal events following, but it was only because of my heightened awareness that I was able to pick up on these things or see these things, for example, like shadow people.
Yeah.
But at that point, the shift had already happened, so there's no fear. And that I actually dedicated an entire chapter to the paranormal in this new book, Opemn Your Third Eye, because when you're grounded and centered and know who you are, you can experience these entities, but there's no fear in you, and it's fear that they love to attach to. It's that reaction. So you can experience them, but there's no fear in the experience.
Yeah. I agree there.
Yeah, I liken it like when, as a paranormal investigator myself for many years, and people going into people's homes, and especially in Western society, when people start having experiences, their first instinct is to be afraid because they've seen one too many movies, or, you know, the stories in our culture, and they think that they have to be afraid of it. And if it is a negative type of entity, or sometimes what I'd call a paranormal parasite, you know, that feeds off of that energy, it causes situations to make people even more afraid. And then, of course, it feeds even more, and it gets stronger and stronger, like a mosquito or a leech, blood sucking. You know, but it's the energy out of you.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please feel free.
That's exactly what happens. So they set you up for that cycle where it happens, you know, it ends up being a bit of a tormentor to a lot of people when they're reacting or afraid. It's that reaction and then event and then reaction. So you're feeding into it.
And see, you know, I don't believe personally in like demonic entities. Now, that's not saying there's not, you know, some nasty stuff out there, but I think in most of the cases, there are relatively low level types of entities or energies, and they'll get stronger and they'll create more havoc with people just in order to feed off themselves. I mean, a lot of these famous cases that they'll even turn into movies, I think, start like that. So I don't know. We've had a lot of our own experiences over the years. Now, with your transformation and getting past it, were you taking other specific steps to either practices, or were you doing classes or meeting with people? I mean, how did you go about learning to fully transition over to this form of thinking and feeling?
So what had actually happened was, in the weeks before the shift, I had been staring at a book in a bookstore, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Dr. Daniel Amen. Funny, that last name. And there was a sentence in that book that I think it was page 60 or 65, and it said, basically, when you allow negative thoughts to go unchallenged, that sort of struck a chord in me. So I kept the book in my car with me, and this one particular day, it was now early November, I had a patient cancel, and I would do what I'd normally do. I'd jump in my car and just try to relax, and this time the book was there. But I did have a patient to go back to. So I went and drove a few blocks and parked off of a side street near work, and I began to just think and recall that phrase. As I begin to recall that phrase, an audible voice, not male nor female, came through me and said, "Challenge your thoughts." And in that instant, the third eye began to vibrate intensely. And I remember turning my head, looking around as this was happening, and experiencing what I describe as clarity. So what had happened was, with this negativity sort of bombarding me over the years, it was now being met with this incredible force. So at this point, I was not even willing or trying to stop it. It was actually operating on its own. The astounding thing, and it's still, I find it interesting, is I still went back to work while this was going on. I had one patient left. So I went back to work, and here's now this activated force. I'm working and finishing this last patient. I get in my car, and now it's pouring rain. I drive home, and I'm still experiencing this negativity try to sort of bombard me, and this activated force, which is now stopping it automatically. I get home, and I lie down, and I say, "Just let me die." And in that instant, I popped out, and I can't tell you how long I was gone, or I don't even remember going anywhere. When I came back, I realized what had happened. When I came back, I understood what had happened. And it was within days of that event, I began to experience automatic writing. And so I'd be driving to work and having to pull over, and I'd start writing and start writing and start writing, and it was automatic. Within the first 3 weeks, so this is now November into December, so by Christmas, I had already written a book, and by the third week in December, I'd given my first talk on consciousness and the awakening process. So it was like I had removed that conditioning, that sort of, or that veil that covers us to our true nature and to the wisdom, clarity that's inside of all of us. There's absolutely nothing special about enlightenment or tapping into this. We all have the ability, but I had opened the faucet now, and it was just expressing through me. But there were no classes, nothing else that was.
It all seemed to happen naturally. Now you said you popped out. What do you think? What do you think that meant? Did it mean, do you feel like you, like an out of body experience or an astral travel experience, or what do you think happened?
What happened in that moment was that experience of dying before you die is what I would describe it. I popped out, I left, I was gone, and when I returned, I just remember breathing in quite deeply and sitting up, and then just having that awareness what this was all about. I remember describing these events to my brother-in-law, who had been reading over the years, like authors like Wayne Dyer. And as I'm describing this, my brother-in-law comments, I think you've had an awakening. So he was one of the first people that understood what was happening, because it's quite a shift. It's quite a shift in awareness, and it's quite a shift overall in terms of experience.
So when you said you were doing automatic writing, you said it became a book. Was this your first book that you published in 2006, The Challenge Your Thoughts, Healing Mind, Spirit, and Body with Truth?
Yes. So as I started to write, I began sharing it with my brother-in-law, and I was trying to just sort of, okay, so what does the universe want from me now? So I remember one day in deep meditation just asking, and I just got the sort of the vibration, write a book. So I ended up naming it Challenge Your Thoughts, because that was the initial experience. And in that first book, I just essentially took apart and dissected the egoic or thinking mind, and just shed light on human conditioning and essentially, and there's nothing wrong with it. This is what's important to mention, is we come into this realm and we are introduced to third dimensional reality. So we operate between past and future, and not one level of awareness is better than another. Each one serves a purpose, and each one opens the door, leads into another level of consciousness or awareness. So it's just that for myself, by the time I had reached my early 30s, the emotional pain that came with it, and just how sensitive I was to it. When I look back, I, for the most part, never really identified myself with what I was, or with who I thought I was, but I just didn't know that there was another level of awareness, that there was, freedom from automatic negative thinking.
So,
sorry, Mark.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to ask about the automatic writing. Now, I used to do automatic writing when I was younger, and obviously in them days, I'm not giving away my age, people, but computers were in massive, great things that you kicked in big rooms. Do you understand what
I was going to say,
Mark?
was this back in the days of horse and buggies?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
And the speed that I would write, I would pick up a pen or a pencil, and I could watch the television while I was doing it. I could literally watch the television, and my hand used to go at such a speed, and it would be audible. You're readable, audible, readable. It would be readable, and it would make sense, whatever I wrote. And yet I would be watching the television.
So you'd be focused consciously on the television, but subconsciously
and allow my hand to go,
connecting and letting it go.
And the pen would go with such a speed, and it would hardly come off the paper. So, when you talk about automatic writing, did you do it with a typewriter? Was it with a typewriter?
Looking back, I had wished I'd written that first book on computer. I wrote the first one on lined paper because I remember purchasing equipment to sort of translate it into a computer because it was so much. But it was that book, like just for an example. So that book was almost 200 pages, and I wrote that over a 7-day process.
So I was quite quick.
It was quite quick, and I still have that manuscript somewhere, but it was quite messy. But it comes almost as downloads, and it's your hands, whether you're typing or writing, almost cannot keep up. It's there, right. And it's literally you're just now channeling it, allowing it to express. These books, from one perspective, have almost written themselves, and even what I've realized, even with Opening Your Third Eye, writing this book, is the realization even our psychic abilities have a consciousness of their own. And by us just getting out of the way, we allow them to express themselves, and they can assist us and guide us and empower us.
Do you think it was your higher self that helped you write this book? Or do you think it was maybe from the spirit world or something like that?
Yeah, I feel and I sense it's the highest self expressing through me. And I also feel we are also sort of assisted by guides.
Because I used to write in all different handwriting.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and some of it was in Old English. Yeah, so... Yeah.
Well, you've had quite a few people working through you anyway.
You're saying I've been about.
Well, saying that, but you've also been incorrigible where they're trying to get through to you and talk to you, and you're just telling them to just piss off and leave you alone.
Yeah, run and jump.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's it, because I'm my own boss.
So when you would write out let's say the first book, doing the automatic writing, would you then go back and reread what you wrote? And were you surprised by anything that you wrote down?
I would do that, and there'd be moments. It's almost like to the conscious mind, to our local self, or to the local mind. It's sort of it would be a somewhat astounding what's coming through, because it's not something we're taught. It's not something that's been demonstrated. But then there's the deepest self, which realizes this is just expression of our spiritual nature coming through. It's the soul expressing. So, but from a human perspective, it is interesting, to say the least, to see what is available to us just by tuning in and paying attention, listening, and allowing an awareness. If there's any takeaway with regards to spirituality or even psychic abilities, awareness is absolutely everything.
Now, with the awareness, again, I know a lot of people who use meditation, toward transcendental meditation, different types of techniques in order to quiet the mind and connect. I'm one of those people who I find it nearly impossible to meditate or quiet my monkey brain because it just constantly chatters, throws in songs, does everything. And it's very difficult to keep it still and reach that point where I can just reach that cone of silence, as I call it, in order just to experience that stillness.
What he's saying actually is, have you got any quick tips on that?
So a pretty short and to the point tip to that is becoming aware of your own awareness. So there is the you or the self that is experiencing that inner dialogue. So two things is become aware of the awareness experiencing that inner dialogue that can create massive shifts. And the other one is, as you're experiencing that stream of thought, if you become more centered or become aware of the now, of the present moment, that tends to slow the thinking mind a little bit. And when you begin to do that, you will notice gaps of stillness or nothingness between the thoughts. When you become more aware of that space, you create the potential for that to expand and unfold. The other thing you can do is even becoming very aware of wherever you are. For example, if there's a plant in the room, is just become aware of the awareness or the stillness of that plant, because what we tend to look at is mirrored within us. So if you begin to recognize, okay, that plant is still, and just become aware, that tends to raise our vibrational frequency to the point where you now are vibrating at that stillness and becoming aware of it. The moment one really just becomes hyper aware of that stillness is the instant where an inner transformation can take place, and then the reversal happens. Now you're mostly stillness and then experiencing thought as needed to go about your day.
You know what? How I used to do it, if I had something on my mind that kept interrupting. Not that I meditate very much, but very hardly at all. But there was a time when I used to. If I had something that kept on interrupting my thoughts or coming in as thoughts and everything, I used to imagine a blackboard, and I would write it down on the blackboard, then rub it out. And with that, it was gone. I know it sounds crazy, but it does work.
That's actually a very profound technique.
I know. I learned it from a Russian.
I was going to say it is, because when you're imagining that...
I did learn that from a Russian.
When you're imagining that, that's taking place in real time in the quantum field. And what you're doing in the quantum field is what is expressed into this reality. So I completely understand how that would have been an excellent technique.
So, with moving forward, now you have your latest book that, and I misspoke earlier. Your book was released earlier in June.
June 8th.
June 8th.
I believe it will actually be available July 1st in the UK.
Okay. So it's Opemn Your Third Eye, activate your sixth chakra and develop your psychic abilities. So let's talk a little bit about your own psychic abilities that you've developed. And, what have you experienced once you started down this path?
The first experience I'd like to share, this actually took place many years ago, even before the shift, is I was away at school and studying in the United States. And so back then, high school went up to grade 13. So when I started college in the States, my girlfriend was in her last year of high school. She was in grade 13. So I received a phone call in my first semester being away. She was frantic and saying that a stranger had come up to her and tried talking to her. And the moment she tried to get away, he actually ended up sort of chasing her to the high school. And so she was pretty upset. So that happened, and then a week went by, and now she's suddenly getting crank phone calls and harassing phone calls. So I'm now traveling from Cincinnati back home every weekend, which is about a 400-mile trip one way, to try to just comfort her. And, before I went away to school, I worked, part-time as an investigator. So I always had this sort of ability to read things and read into situations. So time went on, and it got so bad that the police had to get involved, and the phone company. So they had actually traced where the phone calls were coming from. So she called me one day to tell me, they found the area where the phone calls were coming from. I said, great. I said, tell me where. And she goes, no. She goes, I can't tell you. And so again, I'm like, you have to tell me where these are coming from. I want to see. The one thing I'll say real quick is I grew up sort of in downtown Hamilton. It was a bit of a rough neighborhood, and in the 90s, if there were issues, you either dealt with them, through confronting things. And the thing is, I grew up taking martial arts for years and years and years. Never once started a fight. I would defend people and I would defend myself, but I would never, ever think of doing that. So she knew, my girlfriend knew, what I could do, and she would not give me the intersection. Finally, while I'm on the phone with her, in what I will call as a state of intense desire, I felt a surge of energy go down my spine, shoot back up, and I literally had an image in the kitchen where I sat.
Kundalini.
Exactly. And I said, Barton and Lottridge, I'm going to get him. I know where he is. She dropped the phone and she couldn't believe. She picked up the phone. She couldn't believe, she asked me, how did you know? And I said, it just came to me in a vision. So shortly after, we ended up finding where he was actually living. And I showed up one day and I just told him from across the street in no uncertain terms, you need to leave, and you need to leave her alone. And that was essentially the end of that. But it's incredible when I reflect on that, just the intensity of wanting to know and how it expressed through me. So I never gave it much thought after that. But I was pretty far away, from my hometown to experience that. And the actual phone calls were actually coming about a mile away from where this individual even lived. It was nowhere on my radar whatsoever.
I was going to say, I instantly went to the old horror movie reference. It's coming from within the house. Oh, good Lord. Very interesting. Very interesting. Now, when you are doing your talks and helping other people, what is part of your process when when you're trying to help people connect?
I like to give essentially a foundation. So I talk a little bit about what the egoic or thinking mind is, who we are in terms of spirituality, and what the quantum field is, and or essentially that spiritual realm. We've been conditioned to think there's life here and then the afterlife, or the spiritual life, where in fact the two are one, and it's just getting past and looking beyond the five senses and everything that is manifested in this reality, which is essentially on a quantum field, 99.99999% space. It's a wonderful illusion in one sense.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. I was going to say, can you talk about the chakras? But if you talk about the chakras, it's going to take it away from the book, isn't it? People are not going to go and buy the book. Unless you make it so interesting that they want to buy the book.
With the chakras, essentially, my approach to writing this book and my approach to activating the chakras is third eye or the sixth chakra is the one that lights them all up or brings them all online.
Well,
So,
as soon as I think, or as soon as I tell my subconscious, okay, right, I'm going into whatever I'm going into at the time, you know, whether it's remote viewing or whether it's doing psychic work or whatever, I get that sensation straight there on my brow. Do you get that?
You absolutely.
I get a sensation.
Yes, you're actually connecting with it, and I would.
But I don't have to. With me, I don't have to. Well, maybe it's because I've been doing it for over 50 odd years. It comes automatically now.
Yeah, automatic. And what I would say is, a lot of people, even with meditation, if they would actually spend a few minutes and become aware of that third eye and just tune into, because the third eye is that doorway into our spiritual selves, and the intermediary is the subtle body. So you can get to a point within minutes of actually experiencing waves of energy in the entire. This is it.
Well, I feel the sensation on my brow and on the top of my head. And once I've got that, I know I'm, ready.
You're connecting to universal consciousness.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing.
So the chakras, for those people that don't know what a chakra is, could you explain that?
Absolutely. So we have a physical body. There's the subtle body that is connected to the soul. So the subtle body is, in essence, houses all the chakras, and the chakras are essentially energy wheels, and they're located or connected to organs throughout the body. So we have the root chakra, for example, and when we are connected and grounded and able to sort of stand on our own, that chakra is functioning clearly without any sort of roadblocks. And in opposite terms, if we are feeling that area blocked, then we're going to think that we are insecure or not able to stand on our own. So each chakra is an energy wheel that represents sort of an emotional aspect to the subtle body. And when we are balanced, those are allowed to freely form, freely function and spin. And they essentially pull in universal force, universal energy, and understanding, clarity, wisdom. There's a whole bunch of spiritual faculties and tools that are channeled through those chakras. So becoming aware of them and, being centered in the present moment is what aligns us closer to those and the potential that's within them.
So there's the 7 major ones, but there are also many, many more on the body, on your hands, your feet, all over the place.
Yes, I've actually I've studied that a little bit, and I actually met a pretty incredible energy master a few months ago. Actually, I went in just to do some somewhat of TENS. It was like a TENS machine attached to like some acupuncture. I've always liked acupuncture.
Oh, yeah, I've got a couple of TENS machines. I tell you, they're for rheumatism.
Yeah, they're excellent. But he is well versed in all those meridian points and mini chakras. But in terms of an introduction and even someone who I feel like in terms of this book, it will appeal to someone wanting to get into it, someone who has experience in it, and also those more advanced who want to really become more aware and gain greater awareness into the potential that there is in the third eye.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds a very good book, actually.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you.
Yeah, it does.
Now, would you say that this you channeled or automatic wrote with this book as you did with the others, or did you take a different approach with it?
With this book, I essentially just channeled it. When I got to a point when I actually started writing the section on the paranormal, I wanted to find out what percentage roughly of people. I think it was actually an American poll of what percentage of people believed in paranormal. So I had to do a little bit of research for that, but 99% of the book is just channeled automatic writing.
Now, in terms of the paranormal, I mean, what other types of experiences have you had during your life? Did you have anything before this awakening, or has it been primarily after this transcendence?
There was one experience at 16 that was pretty alarming, and it's interesting. It happened once, and it never happened again. And then after the shift, yes, there were quite a few moments. But this one experience was my brother used to work as a correctional officer, and he would get up early in the morning, and he had a habit, as some big brothers do, to sort of pick on their little brother. So he would make a lot of noise in the morning. And so I was wide awake. I was totally awake. And when he would make that noise and throw keys in his pocket and stuff, you knew what was going on. He was off to work. He would leave around 6:30 a.m. and walk to work. And this one morning, I was 16. My sister's bedroom was in the next room over, and he left. And within minutes of him leaving, I noticed on the foot of the bed. Now, this building that we lived in, we actually owned a hardware store. So my dad built the building. It wasn't like it was an old building. The building was built in 1978. And so it's not like it was an old house or anything. But as I looked to the foot of my bed, I saw the silhouette of a female apparition. It was just pure black. And instantly, it sort of telepathically said, "I'm going to get you." And in that moment, I felt myself being pressed down. And it took about 4 or 5, 6 attempts to call out to my sister. And when she ran and darted into the room, it just instantly left. I don't remember. I didn't even mention it to my other siblings. I don't remember even mentioning to my mom or my dad. It's just one of those instances, and I never gave it another thought. But that was my first, I would say, encounter that I ever remember having with something otherworldly.
Sounds like a version of a combination of sleep paralysis and what's also referred as the old hag syndrome, where people who've talked about whether we're dealing with incubus or succubus type of entities, or even just the fact that a woman like shadow person appeared, said they're going to get you, and then you felt that pressing down. Now, I've experienced that when I moved out from California here to New Jersey about 21 years ago. The first house I lived in had activity, which is what got me into the paranormal. And there were several times I would wake up. I never saw anything, but I would feel paralyzed, and I would feel that pressure. And it was more of like an energetic force holding me down, pushing me down to the bed. In fact, I'd feel myself sinking further down at times. And in my mind, I wasn't afraid. I felt like it was an external intelligence. I tried talking to it in my head, but then it would still get more intense. And at that point, I would just say, okay, that's it, you're done, and surround myself with white light and mentally push it away. And after about a minute or so, it would just dissipate and go away. Now, most people, you think you jump up and go, oh my God, what just happened? Me, I just go right back to sleep.
That's another question. The white light, do you do any sort of protection? This awareness that you've got, do you only use this for teaching other people, or do you use it for anything in your life besides writing books and one thing or another? And do you use some sort of protection or something like white light or golden light, or say a prayer or something?
What I do is so being centered, so operating and sort of living in that moment by moment. your vibrational frequency is raised quite a bit. So in that stillness, there's nothing that really can feed off that. But for example, and I make I offer some affirmations in the book. For example, if you experience, let's say, some unwanted visitors in the evening, you can give thanks and just essentially throw that out. Thank you that I'm protected tonight and every night, or I am unharmable, or I am surrounded by pure light. But for the most part, if you're operating from that frequency, there's nothing for them. Fear, for example, or these lower energies or entities, they like that reaction because that's what they can cling to. So not operating in that frequency. It's sort of it makes you very highly sensitive to them, but on the other hand, you're also incredibly protected and shielded from them. The experiences I lived shortly after my shift, I moved into a house that it was a semi, and believe it or not, it was across the street from a cemetery in Burlington, and actually Aldershot, where I lived. That area was a hub, and the experiences I had in there were almost enough that I was going to write a book strictly on the paranormal. I ended up staying there 5 or 6 years, and it would be like an occurrence like once a year, once every 9 months, something would happen in there. And some of them were just incredible, and just a hub. It was just a hub for activity.
Yeah, you should try my house. What sort of things did you experience in that place then?
Some were benign, and some were, from one point of view, could be viewed as terrifying. The one incident, and I described this in the book, was a curious apparition. So I love going to bookstores, and I love just spending an hour there and just reading. And this one fall day, I grabbed the keys. It was about 4 p.m. And what I'll start with is it was a raised semi. So there were 3 or 4 steps up, and we had identical windows. And the bottom part of the window was at least 5, if not 5.5 feet off the ground. So this one afternoon, I opened my door, and I happened to glance right, and there was a full-bodied black female apparition, head to toe, covered in black, looking into my neighbor's window. The instant it realized that I could see it, the reaction on it, and then how it just spun into essentially a circle and vanished in front of me, spoke volumes to me. And I stayed there. Like I said, I stayed there for another year or two. And believe it or not, I kept my shutters closed, not out of fear. It was the idea of something looking into my unit, into my home, just sort of irked me. But that was a pretty profound experience, and I still remember looking at.
I've just imagined it. It's just played out in my head like a film, exactly as you said it.
Yeah. It had larger than normal eyes. The whites were white as white, and the center or the pupils were black as night, and everything else about it was just black. And it's just. And I never saw it again. It was that one instant.
I wonder how come it is that whenever you see anything, you're seeing it as black.
It's interesting. And even with the shadow people, same sort of thing. They're actually, when you spot them, they're actually darker than dark.
Yeah.
They stand out.
That's right. They're darker than night.
They're dark. Yeah, they're absolutely, and they're not hard to spot it, with some awareness and just being aware of your surroundings.
Yeah. I'm just wondering why you're only seeing in dark and not in dark them as dark instead of seeing them in colour. because I see everything. I see a lot of it in color. If there's something going to be black, it's going to be black. You know,
the one experience I have all that I had was almost all of it was energetic. I was almost done wrapping up writing the book, and I met up with a real estate agent. There was a house listed that sort of ticked off everything that I was looking for. Yeah. And it was a 2-hour drive, and I showed up there, and it was during all this, social distancing and everything. So she opened the door and she walked through the corridor. She said, "I'll meet you in the backyard." She said, "Take your time, look around, whatever, So I went in, and there's an immediate kitchen, and to the left, a very big family room. And when I got to the first master bedroom behind there, I remember turning on the lights, and it still sort of seemed dark in there. And it had 2 big, big lights. And when I walked in, I was hit with a feeling of fear, dread, and literally the smell of death. So,
that's
ignore it.
Tell you, done that. That's not a nice smell.
No, so I tried to.
I've smelt that.
Yeah.
You didn't tell Brian to go take a shower?
Shut up. No, I smelt that many, many years ago. I'll tell you about that one. I can't talk about that one on the radio, Mark, but I will tell you about it.
Okay.
So, I finished touring the rest of the house, and I got outside, and I was then sort of guided, hey, go back into that room. And what I noticed again, though, is when I went back into that room, I noticed the agent never came near, like not even, in the next room prior. She stayed in the hallway. So the second time in, I'm now hit like a load of bricks. Whatever I had experienced before was now even more profound. And I remember just having this thought, I couldn't stay here 5 minutes, let alone one night. So finally I called out the agent's name, and I said, "I got to ask you something." And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "Did someone die in this house?" I go, "Did someone die in this room?" And I actually could feel her reaction when she met me in the hallway. Her the area around her neck was just beet red. And she said, "Actually, I'm selling the house for friends. Both parents died within weeks in that room." And I guess here in Ontario, for example, real estate agents don't have to tell you if someone's passed in a house unless you ask. So
same here.
So I learned my lesson too is not, to follow that intuition and to follow up on it. I like the house so much. Regardless, that energy could have been cleared. Probably could have most likely been cleared. But I felt it was so fresh and it was so heavy. I just really didn't want to have to do with it. And then there was an issue in the backyard in terms of where the property line went to, but that was sort of that was interesting because that was all energetic and just me being aware. Okay, why is it still dark in here? I have both lights on.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, I've never really seen much with my naked eye. I've just had experiences hearing things, footsteps, disembodied voices. But I've seen things with my third eye at times doing investigations where I'll just start, and I don't claim to be psychic at all. But, again, I've learned to open myself up enough that at times things will come through, more like imagery or information. In one time in this house I was living in, I felt like there was a portal or something in the house. Nothing was in the house itself, but there was transient things kind of coming through every once in a while. One night, my wife and I were just sitting in the living room watching TV, and all of a sudden we both had this overwhelming feeling of being watched. And I looked, and it felt like it was coming across from the dining room. And I looked, but there's nobody there. Yet in my mind's eye, I could see what looked like a workman, a man in his late 30s, early 40s, kind of stocky, thick neck, with like bald or shaved head, wearing these dark, actually more like dark tan coveralls. And he was just standing there staring at us. The type of coveralls he was wearing, it looked very modern, not like something from a long time ago. And it just lasted for a few minutes, and then I didn't see it anymore, and the feeling went away, and then that was it. That's all it was. So it felt like somebody who was just passing through and was looking in on us as he was going his merry way. I've had other times when I was at a friend's house doing an investigation, and I started getting like a name started to come through. I would start saying what was coming in my head, and we were able to validate a lot of that information.
Jiulio, and he tells me he's not psychic.
I think we all, I know we're all psychic. It's just becoming ever more aware. It's our own awareness that we're such powerful creative beings. It's our awareness that actually gives life to these latent abilities within us. So the more you become aware, and the more it's just sort of you open the door, even like with synchronicity, the more you become aware of synchronicity, the next thing you know, you're experiencing it, throughout the day, almost every day.
The reason I feel the reason I feel the need to say that is I don't want to come across and claim, yes, I'm a psychic to anybody, because
everybody's got these abilities, Mark.
Right.
You get the housewife whose child's late home from school. She gets a gut feeling something's wrong.
Yeah.
So she goes out looking for him.
Oh, yeah, but I've had everything from precognitive dreams to, like I said, hearing voices, to experiencing all sorts of different types of things, even early dreams that I realized, it took me a while later on that I realized were out-of-body experiences when I was younger. So I've had things happen, but again, they're so few and far between. It's not a regular occurrence for me.
I would tend to agree with Mark. I'm sort of not a fan of labels. I know to describe experience.
I'm the one who's not a fan of labels.
You sort of have to. Okay, well, I've experienced this, so maybe there's some empathic quality, or even I would never even want to say. It's just we all have these abilities within us, and it's just how much do you allow them to express through.
It's natural.
The interesting thing is I've never gone looking for these experiences. I've never they've by operating through spirit, through that spiritual awareness, they seem to just spontaneously express themselves, and especially when needed the most, even when I didn't know I needed them to happen. Like, for example, like with my girlfriend many years ago, I wanted to, but you don't think, oh, I'm just going to think it and I'm going to have a vision. They just spontaneously, and that's how they've always seemed to take place, whether it was either a paranormal
that's
event.
the best way. Like, if you go look, it's like anything. You lose your keys, the more you look for them, you're never going to find them.
Exactly.
You sit back and relax, and then all of a sudden you remember where they are.
It's funny that you mention that, because in this sort of way of being, you're hyper aware and yet completely relaxed, if that makes sense, at once. Mm-hmm. It's just you're very sensitive to the energy, but you're very centered. So there's a calm, there's a peace with it, and it's clarity that allows you to literally read energy like a book.
That's right. But I labels, I hate labels. Literally, that is my pet peeve, isn't it, Mark?
Yeah, that's why we call you an extra sensor, because nobody knows what it means. That was a term we came up with.
People say, are you psychic? No, I'm grandmother. I'm a grandmother. I'm a mother. Housewife.
Pensioner.
Dog's body. Yeah, no, I won't talk about anything like that. me being like that. I've lived with it all my life. So to me, I don't need a label because this is the way I've been all my life.
It's an extension of you. It's an extension. That's what it is.
Yeah.
See, I've always been under the feeling that, you're right. We all have these abilities, and I think a long time ago we all used to have these abilities much stronger, but they've been programmed out of us. We've been desensitized to it, especially in Western culture and society where, it's frowned upon. It's looked at as superstition, and you especially with religion, when organized religion comes into it, anything that isn't sanctioned by the organized religion, it's of the devil. And so, being able to feel spirits or have dreaming of the future or whatever was all considered, taboo. So it was, we're a repressed, spiritually repressed society, even though we're a very religious society. Spiritually, we're very repressed. And people will have these experiences. Some people will be very tuned into it. Others, maybe they'll experience things, but then they'll blow them off. I mean, I've had experiences, like I said, when I was younger, I'd hear what sounded like my mom calling me from across the house. So I'd go out of my room, go track her down and say, "What do you want?" She goes, "I don't know. What do you want?" I go, "Well, you were calling me." "No, I wasn't." And it wasn't until later when I started to realize it wasn't my mother's voice. It was as you said, not male, not female, just a very androgynous type of voice that was trying to reach out to me and connect with me. Now, let me ask you another question. In regards to, you've seen spirits, whether they're of people type ghosts or other types of entities, but have you had contact or interacted with what would be considered higher level entities, whether what people would consider to be angels, ascended masters, or any other higher vibrational frequency entities?
It's interesting you mentioned that. Shortly after my shift, I remember distinctly going into, again, a bookstore and being led to a certain book by what I would describe as the vision in my eye was sort of like a Buddha figure or a monk. And it led me to this one book. I can't remember the name of it, but it was on essentially Buddhism and on, suffering and, personal freedom. And I've had books, jump off shelves in front of me, but that's the one that comes to mind, was literally feeling I was being led by my hand and directed to a book to read. So that's one of the experiences. I've the vision, that I experienced when my brother was passing, for example, that was off to a distance. So I haven't had anything other than sort of either, inner knowing or, hearing an audible voice. But that one comes to mind in the bookstore that one day.
Interesting. Now, I had an experience about not quite a year after my brother passed away where I was sleeping and it felt like something was pulling the covers off of my bed. And again, I didn't see anything, but in my mind's eye, there was my brother down there pulling the covers off. So I'd pull him back up, tell him to go screw off, leave me alone. And then a few minutes later, I'm still kind of awake, in that half awake, half asleep. But I definitely wasn't asleep. But then it felt like a female hand just stroked the side of my face in a very kind of comforting, almost motherly or matronly way. So, my mother's still alive, so it wasn't her. But it was interesting. It was an interesting. I still don't know who it was. I never got a feeling off of it of who it could have been.
Did you have grandmother that had passed?
Yeah, my grandmother had passed, so it might have been her.
It's possible, yeah.
So do you look on... this is difficult to explain. Do you look on yourself as everything that you're getting is from your higher self, or that you have guardian angels or spirit guides leading you all the way?
So what I feel is just being connected with source energy. So it's that return to the self or the one self. In spiritual circles you hear of oneness or being one. So it's that direct experience, but through that self, there are guides. You will experience, if you're open to it, guidance from other spirit guides. But it all goes back to it's coming from a space of, and the way I mentioned this in the book, the way to determine it, is it a high vibrating frequency? Is it or is it coming from a low energy? So anything fear-based, that's coming from ego or from some or other source. But if it's coming from high vibrating, intuitive, and just listening and having that discernment. That's the word I want. It's just that discernment of whether it's a situation or a person. You're more operating from energy, feeling, and vibration than anything else. You're not so much operating from physical senses. It's just tuning into the field of information that's we're all connected to, and it's just letting go of any roadblocks that are stopping you from tuning into it. It's actually quite natural. Yeah. You see, I don't go with, I shouldn't say this really because I've got a lot of people that follow me, but I don't really go with the guide and spirit guides and things like that. I believe it's higher self. But I also believe that when you are to a certain point within your higher self, that you're able to connect with the higher self of others. Do you understand me there? Yeah, I would agree with that. You're accessing higher dimensions of consciousness, and if you're open to it, you're going to experience that. If you're open to that, so there is so much more to what appears in front of us, and there is a lot more. Like even just paying attention and looking at the night sky at night, you'd be surprised what you see. If
aliens,
you take the time.
Well, where Irene lives is a UFO highway.
Really?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, it's a very strange place where I live. I live in the place where Merlin was conceived.
Oh, wow.
Carmarthenshire.
Have you, Irene, have you seen things up there?
Yeah, all the time. I don't take any notice. It's like Mark says, it's, like UFO highway out there some nights.
Yeah, I would try to tell her to go out and take...
I don't take no notice of anything anymore.
I tell her...
It's an age thing.
Yeah, I try to tell her to go out and take your camera and videotape stuff and whatever, but she can't be bothered. She'd rather go watch the telly.
Interesting.
Well, out there in the bloody cold for you, sitting out there waiting for a spaceship to fly over.
Well, it is summertime. It's a bit warmer out right now. I try to get her to go out in the fall but it's getting colder because they have where she lives. It's what's known as the Welsh Bigfoot or the Trey Moore.
Well, that's what we call him.
And you'll hear it sometimes in the fall calling, making the screams and howls coming out from the hills. So I tell her, well, get out there and with your recorder.
Wild peacock.
You get out there and start recording it. I want to hear it. And she goes, I ain't going out there. It's cold.
Yeah. But I have seen some really weird stuff out there. I really have. So, who knows? Who knows what we got out there? I don't know.
Have you ever walked into areas like not like say a house per se, but maybe an area of land or whatever where you'll suddenly feel it has a much more concentrated, intense energy than others?
I've sort of experienced coming into spaces. You sort of gauge. Okay, so you sort of gauge what is very neutral, and then what seems off or heavy or energetic, like a difference in energy. But it wasn't something. I wouldn't say it was something profound. It's just sort of like subtleties in the energy, and you tend to, unless something takes place, you tend to sort of almost blow them off. Like, okay, that was different, but you just sort of move on. But nothing in terms of, you may pick up on an entity in an area or a space, or even walking outside. But if there's no skirmish, if nothing really takes place, you just sort of you leave, you let it be, and you move on. But nothing to extremely notable.
Well, the reason I ask is because during my investigations here, especially around northern New Jersey and elsewhere, and places where I've lived, I've realized that there are locations that are high energy areas where there's an elevated level of paranormal activity, but it's not associated with a particular house, or it's like somebody seeing a ghost, but it's a variety of different types of activity, and it will affect entire neighborhoods within that area. I lived in a couple of those areas. That first house I mentioned, where I had the sleep paralysis, it wasn't just my house that was experiencing things. My neighbor next door was experiencing things. I moved to another location across town, and it turned out to be a hot spot. I did a series of investigations of two houses across the street from each other in this one town in New Jersey, that whatever was going on was definitely affecting the land in the whole neighborhood, and not just one house. So definite high pockets of paranormal energy in these areas.
I would have to, I completely agree with that. If going back to that house I lived at, which was across the street from the cemetery, that area was a definite hub. And I remember my neighbor telling me the one time, walking his dog, he'd take his dog for walks in that cemetery, and the one day he bent down to tie a shoe, and something came up from behind him and literally put its knee, what he felt was a knee, on his back, and it held him there for about 15 minutes, middle of the day. And that happened to him that one time. But that area, looking back, I would say, yeah, that was some sort of hub. Whether there, it's attachments because there was a cemetery there, that's probably a big part of it. And for what other reasons, I'm not exactly sure, but that was a definite hub. I actually had neighbors a few doors down comment the one time they would see orbs around 5 or 6 feet off the ground as well in that cemetery at night. I never saw them, but yeah, there's definitely some areas where it's more concentrated than others. Absolutely.
I've seen orbs in cemeteries using an infrared night vision scope. Watched one and knew it wasn't a bug or dust, as it was across about 50, 60 feet away, meandering around and going behind trees, and then coming around and slowly coming closer and closer until it flew over my head. Very interesting. I didn't see it with the naked eye, but the infrared picked it up. But even now, doing the investigations, I'm using less equipment these days and concentrating more on my own intuition and what my body's telling me. Although, if I take anything with me, it'll be a digital recorder, because I pick up a lot of audio.
Yeah, absolutely. The digital recorder, I find, is a great tool in that. And going back to the body, I think that's an incredible tool. Just feeling that, resonating energy, that energy bouncing off us, knowing, okay, so this is what neutral is, and, something is speaking to me, and there's something else here. I think that's, one of the best pieces of equipment we can use.
Yes.
Have you ever done any paranormal investigations, Jiulio?
Myself, no. I've been asked by friends, actually more family, to look into things the occasional time to do somewhat of a clearing. But no, not something that I've looked to do. It's just something that has come up once in a while.
Yeah.
But you can pick up a. I mean, if you're pretty clear, you can read a room, or
I can.
Or it doesn't take.
Well, if this is another thing it's natural. It's all natural. The amount of people that can walk into a room where there's just been a fight and they can feel the atmosphere. Let's face it. You can cut the atmosphere with a knife, even though the people inside the room are going, "Oh, hello, it's lovely to have you." You know jolly well that there's just people in that room, And I can read rooms all the time. Someone's been in them. I can walk into an empty house. I know exactly what's what the atmosphere is, what's gone on there, the energy, the lot. I went to see a house once, actually. I got as far as the front door, and as the front door opened, a knife flew straight at me. But I saw the knife, but it wasn't a real knife. I saw the knife come straight towards me. And a few years later, someone was killed with a knife in that house.
Wow.
Incredible.
I didn't even go over the threshold. Because as soon as I saw that knife, I thought, poltergeist, no way. Straight away, that's what went through my head, poltergeist. But a couple of years later, someone actually got killed in there with a knife.
So you actually had a premonition.
Yeah. You get them quite a lot as well. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jiulio, we are coming up on the end of the show here, and so want to promote your book once more, and you can tell people where they can find it. So it's called Opemn Your Third Eye, Activate Your Sixth Chakra, and Develop Your Psychic Abilities. Now, where can people find that, and how can they get in touch with you?
Thanks. So it's available right now through online retailers, Amazon. It is now in bookstores, and it's making its way in bookstores pretty much in the different U.S. and the U.K. I know it's reaching overseas, and people can get a hold of me either through my website, JiulioConsiglio.com. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
And just so people who haven't seen our banner and your name, your Jiulio is spelled Jiulio.
Exactly. And last name is Consiglio, JiulioConsiglio.com. You can find me.
Fantastic. Well, Jiulio, we've had a great time talking with you tonight. It's been a sincere pleasure, and we really enjoyed having you on.
It's been a tremendous pleasure. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Irene. It's been wonderful talking to you both.
Yeah, it's been lovely having you. Really, it has. And I'm sure people have learned an awful lot. Now get out there and get that book, people.
Yep. Now, I want to thank Jiulio for coming on, and I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to another edition of the Paranormal UK Radio Show, the flagship show here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. See, Jiulio, I got that down pat. I can do it every time without messing up.
You didn't bugger it up again, did you?
That was excellent. That was perfect.
I do use my radio voice for that one. So, well, everyone, you have a great evening, and we will see you all again next week. Take care now. Irene, we'll talk with you soon.
Okay, bye.